Welcome back, everybody. The big news this week was OpenAI and AMD announcing a deal that saw the stock go up 24% in a single day. And honestly, it was much higher than that because I think it started the day up over 35%. And with this being the third big deal that OpenAI has announced over the last month or so, there's a lot of talk about where all the money's actually going to come from. And I even touched on it a bit in my newsletter a couple weeks back. So in this video, we're going to break down the AMD and OpenAI deal, talk about what it means for AMD and for Nvidia, and my thoughts on what it means for OpenAI and the AI trade overall. So let's go ahead and get started.
New AI partnership, and it is fascinating. AMD's stock is surging. OpenAI and AMD getting together, this after OpenAI, of course, doing a deal just a week and a half ago now with Nvidia. Kenzie Sigalos has the details on all of it. What's happening here?
So, Andrew, OpenAI is teaming up with AMD in a partnership that could give Sam Altman's startup a 10% stake in the chipmaker virtually for free. Now, the rollout starts with 1 gigawatt of AMD's Instinct GPUs in 2026 and expands to 6 gigawatts across multiple hardware generations. Now, as part of this arrangement, OpenAI receives up to 160 million shares of AMD stock through performance-based warrants priced at just 1 cent each, compared to AMD's current trading price of around $165. Now, those shares vest as deployments grow, but both companies are also billing it as a massive win for AMD, which has trailed Nvidia for years. It's also a clear sign that OpenAI doesn't want to be dependent on just one supplier. This is all about OpenAI locking in the supply chain that it needs to scale.
So basically, OpenAI secures additional compute and diversifies its infrastructure build-out with another provider outside of Nvidia. And AMD CEO Lisa Su had this to say about it.
Yes, today is a big moment for us, a very exciting deal. You know, when you think about where we are today, it is all about AI and how do we use AI to really impact every single industry out there. And the foundation of that is you need to have enough AI compute. And so, yes, what we announced today was a 6 gigawatt deal. It will be, tens of billions of dollars of revenue to AMD over the next few years. And it's really an opportunity for us to even partner deeper with, the clear market leader in AI. And so, we're talking about building 6 gigawatts together. The first instantiation will actually go into place the second half of next year. We see it ramping to, double-digit billions of revenue for us. It's incremental from an AMD standpoint. And most importantly, it actually has us working together on the technology because the technology is just super hard. There's so much we have to do to get it all working. And so bringing, the best of OpenAI and AMD together is what this deal is all about.
So just to go over some of the details of the deal, if we scroll down, we can see that under the terms of the deal, OpenAI committed to purchasing 6 gigawatts worth of AMD's chips, starting with the MI450 chip next year. OpenAI will buy the chips either directly or through its cloud computing partners. And Lisa Su said that the deal would result in tens of billions of dollars in new revenue for AMD over the next half decade. And if we scroll down, we see that it says OpenAI will receive warrants for up to 160 million AMD shares, roughly 10% of the company, at a price of 1 cent per share. And it'll be awarded in phases if OpenAI hits certain milestones for deployment, plus AMD's stock price also has to increase for the warrants to be exercised. But there were a few more paragraphs here that I thought were interesting. So number one, the deal is AMD's biggest win in its quest to disrupt Nvidia's dominance among artificial intelligence semiconductor companies. AMD's processors are widely used for gaming and personal computers and traditional data center servers, but it hasn't made as much of a dent in the fast-growing market for the pricier supercomputing chips needed by advanced AI systems. It also says OpenAI plans to use the AMD chips for inference, and if we scroll down to the quote from Sam Altman, he says, "It's hard to overstate how difficult it's become to get enough computing power. We want it super fast, but it takes some time." So overall, this tracks with the general theme of the AI infrastructure trade and build out still being strong, with people still trying to get as much compute as possible and spending a bunch of money. So the people that have been hyping up AMD for so long were absolutely rewarded with a huge spike in share price on Monday. And if you've been following my YouTube community posts, you know that I was lucky enough to actually get into some AMD calls late last week, and I was handsomely rewarded on Monday morning. So yeah, I definitely took my profits on that one, and it was a great trade. But look, look, one thing that I think some people are overlooking is that the AMD deal really isn't the same as OpenAI's deal with Nvidia that they announced a few weeks back. And understanding how they're different really kind of tells a story about power dynamics within the AI space. And just to recap some of the details of the Nvidia deal with OpenAI, and basically Nvidia is going to invest $100 billion into OpenAI, which will allow them to build out and deploy at least 10 gigawatts of Nvidia systems for its artificial intelligence data centers to train and run its next generation of models. And the plan is that Nvidia will make its investment in OpenAI progressively as each gigawatt is deployed. And yes, OpenAI is using cash from Nvidia's investments to help pay for new chips produced by Nvidia, a circular arrangement that allows a chip company to turn its balance sheet into new revenue. And this is how some folks have been talking about it.
This is, in many ways, the opposite of NVIDIA. When NVIDIA invested effectively in OpenAI, in this instance, OpenAI is getting shares in AMD, but I also imagine OpenAI is going to have to pay for the access to these chips and these data centers that are going to have these chips.
Is OpenAI using NVIDIA's funds to turn around and fund their competitor?
Well, so that's an interesting element to it, too. But the question is sort of ultimately, where is all the money going to come from? Because even with the money that it's getting from NVIDIA, for example, by my math, it still doesn't have all of this money.
Yeah, great question. So let's start with how it's going to pay for it. The $100 billion worth of equity that NVIDIA is putting into OpenAI is also pegged to certain build-out milestones being met. It's rolling out in $10 billion increments per gigawatt. Now, that goes into a pool of cash that OpenAI can spend on anything that it wants to. It is not contractually obligated to give it all back to NVIDIA. So, yes, ostensibly, that could also go to AMD to buy their chips. And, yes, they are buying the chips from AMD directly, which is separate to this equity arrangement. Now, in terms of how they're going to pay for it, yes, there is a huge shortfall. Each gigawatt is roughly $50 billion. So $35 billion typically goes to the chip maker. The other $15 billion is roughly what the data center build out requires. Now, to pay for that, I was talking to Sarah Fryer 2 weeks ago, and she says that equity is too expensive to hand out. So it's all about debt. And so that $100 billion investment from NVIDIA gives them leverage at the bank because they're not cash flow positive. And Andrew, well, I mean, your entire team has talked to Sam Altman about the fact that he has no intention of becoming profitable anytime soon because his goals are so ambitious, and that requires additional compute build out.
So not only does NVIDIA's deal help fund the specific build out and provide some kind of guaranteed revenue back to NVIDIA, but it also helps OpenAI secure debt to be able to pay for the rest of this stuff. And here's what Jensen Huang had to say about it.
I guess the question becomes, it's great for you to sell it directly to them, but they don't have the money to buy it at this point. Is that why the deal was structured the way it is, where you'll get a stake in OpenAI over time?
They don't have the money yet.
Yeah.
And the way that it's going to happen, for every gigawatt of AI factories, you're probably going to need about $50 to $60 billion for the land-powered shell and all the computing and networking and all that, everything that goes along with that. And they're going to have to raise that money through, first of all, the revenues, which is growing exponentially, equity or debt, and they gave us the opportunity to invest alongside other investors when the time comes. And so it's not something we have to do, but it's something that they're giving us the opportunity to do, and I would love to do.
So even in how Jensen's explaining it here, it's clear that their deal structure is fundamentally different from AMD's. Because look, NVIDIA simply has more leverage than AMD does, and so OpenAI wants to make sure that they can secure NVIDIA GPUs for their infrastructure build-out, and so offering up a piece of the company, which is the most valuable private company ever, according to Jensen Huang, that's part of the deal. And Jensen breaks it down a little bit more here and how it's different from what AMD did.
That was then followed up by this deal earlier this week with AMD and OpenAI. It's got a lot of people trying to figure out what the dynamics are of this industry. What do you think about it? Did you know about that deal before it was announced?
Not really, but our deal is very different than theirs. We've been working with OpenAI through Azure, Microsoft, and OCI and CoreWeave, and so through third parties for quite a long time. In fact, in 2016, I delivered the world's very first AI supercomputer called DGX-1 to a startup, a nonprofit startup in San Francisco, and that company turned out to have been OpenAI. And so we've been working with them for quite a long time. The OpenAI partnership is an addition to what we're already doing with them on the cloud. All of the cloud contracts, we're going to continue to execute on all that. But our partnership with them is quite unique in the sense that this is the first time we're going to sell directly to them. Until now, we've been only selling through the clouds. And so we're going to keep doing that. But the thing that's really exciting is that now, by selling directly to them, we could help prepare them for a day when they're self-hosted hyperscaler. And our agreement basically entails us selling entire systems and infrastructure to them. We're the only company in the world today that really focuses on building the entire AI infrastructure, from CPUs to GPUs to networking chips and switches of all kinds and all the software stacks that go along with that. And so we're quite a unique partner for them to be able to do this.
And I actually think this is interesting and something I haven't heard a bunch of people talk about yet, because everyone focuses on, oh, this is bad for Nvidia because now AMD's in the mix and you have the hyperscalers like Google doing their TPUs and Amazon's doing Trainium and everyone's building their own chips. Now look, first of all, Google doing TPUs is nothing new. They've been doing it for over a decade. We've been talking about Amazon using their own chips for the past 2 years or so. And so those companies are trying to create tiers of service for their cloud compute to try to find a cost-effective mix of their service tiers to be able to sell it to cloud computing customers, which makes perfect sense. But it doesn't change the fact that Nvidia is still best in class. Now, what I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is what Jensen mentioned in that clip, is that Nvidia is helping OpenAI become less dependent on the cloud providers. So while the cloud providers are trying to be less dependent on Nvidia GPUs, Nvidia is helping a key partner like OpenAI become less dependent on cloud computing. And I'm curious to hear more about this as it progresses. Lastly, Jensen talks about his thoughts around the AMD deal.
You mentioned that your deal is very different from AMD's. AMD is in a situation where they're basically giving away a big chunk of their company to be able to be a partner with OpenAI and sell them some of their goods. Is that how you read it?
Yeah, I saw the deal. It's imaginative. It's unique and surprising. Considering they were so excited about their next generation product, I'm surprised that they would give away 10% of the company before they even built it. And so, anyhow, it's clever, I guess.
Yeah, I wondered the same thing. And Lisa Su, who, by the way, is a distant cousin of yours,
yeah,
right?
She's terrific.
At AMD.
Yeah, she's terrific.
The way they've set this up, though, of giving it away, they're also making some big assumptions that their chips are going to be able to compete with your chips that are coming out down the road. Do you think that's the case?
Well, our chips are quite special, and we're running really fast. We're the only company in the world today that builds all of the chips inside an AI infrastructure. And today, back when we first started, 5 years ago even, an Ampere chip or a Hopper chip is just one chip. Today, if you want to build one of these AI supercomputers, it takes a whole bunch of different types of chips to get the performance out of it, because Moore's law, the transistor itself is really slowing down. And we want to create those X factors of performance increase every single year. And we're delivering these new systems every single year. And every year it's multiple times faster than the last generation. In order for us to do that, we have to optimize the entire AI infrastructure. That supercomputer is the most complex computer the world's ever made. And we optimize across all of that, design new chips every year. So one chip alone is not probably going to be able to deliver the type of results we do. But anyways, they're a really good company, and we take them very seriously.
Okay, so we've heard a lot about it. Let's actually break it down in some simple terms. Now, what does it actually mean for AMD? Now, number one, they get guaranteed revenue from OpenAI, which is obviously good. They get a guaranteed partnership with the market leader, and it gets them in the conversation in terms of best-in-class GPUs, or at least trying to gain some market share there. But that comes with a cost of giving up potentially about 10% equity in the company. Now, on the flip side, what does this actually mean for Nvidia? Now, in some ways, it's the same, right? There's some guaranteed revenue back to Nvidia with the OpenAI build-out, and obviously there's a guaranteed partnership with OpenAI, which they already had but will continue on. But then lastly, Nvidia gets an equity stake into OpenAI for this partnership deal. So it's important to understand that nuance of how these two deals are different, right? Both companies get guaranteed revenue. Both companies get a partnership with OpenAI to continue kind of doing stuff going forward. But AMD had to give up equity to get there, while Nvidia got to acquire equity in OpenAI. And obviously there's nuances to each deal, but it just kind of shows who has the leverage in this situation and kind of who's trying to catch up, which, look, there's nothing wrong with that, right? I understand why AMD would do that. Now they're in the conversation. And at the end of the day, it's going to be about whoever actually delivers and executes a great product. And this at least gets them a chance to do so. But then let's take a step back and see, what does this actually mean for OpenAI? I mean, number one, being able to secure chips and chip priority for their compute build out, because we know demand still outweighs supplies for chips, and this helps OpenAI secure some based on pure partnerships, and it likely gives them priority for those chips if supply chains slow down. Plus, obviously, it helps diversify their infrastructure a little bit. Partnering with Nvidia and AMD both obviously helps give them options and a seat at the table at both companies to help drive future designs and changes. And of course, just basically a little bit of leverage against each one, assuming that they can both deliver. And basically for OpenAI, it allows them to take advantage of their current market-leading position and company value to secure themselves a runway to keep building and competing long term. Now, in terms of what it means overall, now I've seen people say that the AMD deal is a negative for Nvidia. And I mean, I guess on the surface, if you want to say, look, they're doing a deal with Nvidia's competitor, so that's a negative for Nvidia. Sure, but I think just based on the deal parameters, you can see how much OpenAI needs and respects NVIDIA's partnership. The real test is going to come when these clusters start being deployed and we see the relative performance and cost versus value of each. And that's really where the rubber's going to meet the road on this. But look, there's a clear story going on here, and you guys are probably tired of hearing me say it, but the AI infrastructure trade is still strong. To me, the strongest companies in the space remain Nvidia and Taiwan Semiconductor, and that's why I actually hold them in my portfolio. But I've said many times that most of these companies are likely to be winners, and not just those two. And this is, I think, a key point that we forget sometimes. We tend to argue about which specific stock we like better than the other, when the reality is that in this space, if you're buying any of these stocks, you're likely going to do well. Because in addition to Nvidia and Taiwan Semi, I would say that AMD, Broadcom, ASML, and Intel are likely all going to do well. They just have slightly different advantages and or risk levels to them. With AMD, they're much smaller in market cap than Nvidia, but also smaller in market share, but they have more opportunity in theory to take market share away. But if we're being honest, as of right now today, they have an inferior product, and yes, their new stuff is supposed to be better, but time will tell. Now, with Broadcom, they obviously design chips for other companies, they have networking aspects, as well as making custom ASICs. And the question here is, are ASICs really going to take off? There's a little bit of back and forth and difference of opinions there, but TBD. Now, in terms of ASML, they have a virtual monopoly in EUV machines, which the foundries need to make the most advanced chips. And really, there's not that much of a bear case, in my opinion, for ASML, at least over the next 5 years or so. Now, if you wanted to nitpick, you could say they have similar geopolitical risks as Nvidia and TSM have, although slightly different. And the fact that they're a Dutch company may add some slight nuance to that. But the only real concern compared to other parts of the chain are that they may feel the slowdown first before anyone else. So you might have companies like Nvidia or TSM that still have record high sales, but maybe TSM projects a slowdown in the future, so they kind of reduce the number of EUV machines that they buy kind of going forward. But again, I mean, this is a very small nitpick. At the end of the day, if you're in ASML, you're probably going to do really well. And then lastly, Intel. Now, we've talked about this at length. They're not really in a position to meaningfully compete right now, but they're the US's only real chance at a legitimate AI foundry, so they're going to be given every single chance to succeed. So this is a turnaround bet that has some tailwinds attached to it, and not really a fundamental investment based on where they're at today. But like I've been saying, I don't think the AI trade is over. Like, yes, the market may cool down. You may have some names that were really hot that give up some of their year-to-date gains, but as long as businesses keep investing money into this space, these companies are going to benefit. And I don't personally see that stopping in the near future. Now, if you wanted to know more about my thoughts on Intel and where I think it's going, you can watch this video right here. Hope you guys have a great day out there. Financial independence is true freedom, so keep building and stacking wins, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.